My days had become a series of familiar routines, each blending into the next with an eerie predictability. The house was quiet now that my 2 kids were grown and living their own lives. Widowed for almost 6 years, I found myself spending most days either at my part-time job at the library or at home with a good book and a cup of tea. At 54, I didn't expect any grand adventures or surprises. Life had settled, in its own way, into a comfortable solitude. My weekly grocery store trip was the one errand I didn't mind. There was something comforting about strolling through the aisles, picking up fresh produce, and choosing a bottle of wine for my quiet evenings. It was on one of these ordinary shopping days that I first saw him. He was standing in front of the pasta shelf, holding a box of spaghetti in one hand and a jar of sauce in the other, looking completely lost. I almost laughed at his expression, a mix of concentration and mild frustration. He must have felt my gaze, because he looked up and caught my eye, flashing me an easy, warm smile. "Excuse me, but do you know if this one's any good?" he asked, holding up the sauce. I chuckled and walked over, giving the jar a quick glance. "It's decent," I said. "But you might want to add a little garlic and basil if you want to make it special." "Ah, good to know. I'm new to this whole cooking thing," he admitted, rubbing the back of his neck, a little embarrassed. "Name's Jake, by the way." There was an openness to his face, a kind of charm that felt genuine. "Nice to meet you, Jake." "I'm Linda," I replied, smiling back. We chatted for a few minutes about pasta, cooking, and how he'd just moved to town. He looked to be in his late 20s or early 30s, far too young for someone like me to be talking to, but something about him put me at ease. As we parted ways, I didn't think much of it. Just a chance encounter, a little bit of brightness in an otherwise ordinary day. Little did I know that this brief moment would be the beginning of something unexpected, something that would breathe life into my routine in ways I could never have imagined. The next time I saw Jake, it was purely by chance, or maybe fate, if I wanted to be dramatic about it. I was back at the grocery store, picking out tomatoes, when I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Linda. Fancy seeing you here again," he said with that same warm smile. We fell into conversation as naturally as old friends. He joked about his latest cooking experiment gone wrong, and I laughed, giving him a few tips to save his future meals. Before I knew it, we were standing outside, still chatting, as people bustled in and out of the store around us. There was something comfortable about being with him, like I didn't have to pretend or perform, I could just be myself. Over the next few weeks, we started running into each other more frequently, each encounter feeling more intentional. He'd call out my name from across the store or, once, he even waited for me outside just to say hello. Eventually, these moments turned into shared coffee breaks at the small cafe next to the grocery store, where we'd sit and talk for hours. He'd ask about my favorite books, my thoughts on movies, even what it was like raising 2 kids on my own. No one had asked me those kinds of questions in years. Jake was open and curious, always eager to learn from my experiences and insights. I found myself looking forward to these conversations, to the little rush of excitement I felt when I spotted him walking over. He was funny and kind, and the way he listened, really listened, made me feel seen in a way I hadn't felt in a long time. I couldn't ignore the spark of joy he brought into my life, like a new breath of air. And it wasn't just one-sided either, he seemed to enjoy our time together as much as I did. Each encounter was filled with light laughter and easy smiles, like we were 2 friends reconnecting after a long time apart. As the weeks went by, Jake became a constant presence in my life. The grocery store and cafe were our meeting grounds, the places where we shared pieces of ourselves that we'd probably kept hidden from others. It was strange, this growing friendship with someone so much younger, but it was also one of the most natural connections I'd felt in years. One quiet evening, I was tidying up my living room when my mind drifted, as it often did lately, to Jake. I found myself smiling, thinking about the way he would tilt his head when he listened to me, or how his eyes would light up whenever he shared a story from his life. It was then that a new, unsettling realization crept in. My feelings for him had deepened beyond friendship. I sat down, my hands resting in my lap, the weight of this revelation settling around me. How had this happened? I hadn't intended to feel this way. But somewhere between his easy laughter and the way he seemed to genuinely care, my heart had started to shift. At first, I tried to rationalize it, telling myself that these were just the feelings of a woman who'd been alone too long, that I was simply craving companionship. Yet, deep down, I knew it was more than that. This wasn't some idle attraction or passing fancy. It was a growing connection, something real and steady, like a fire kindling slowly within me. And, as much as I wanted to deny it, there was a thrill in imagining what it would be like to be more than just his friend. My mind painted small scenes, us sharing quiet evenings together, laughing over dinner, his arm wrapped around me as we walked under the streetlights. The thought of it brought a blush to my cheeks, a feeling I hadn't experienced in years. But alongside the thrill was a wave of self-doubt. Jake was young, full of energy and promise, while I was, well, settled in a different phase of life. What could I possibly offer him? Would he ever feel the same way, or would he just laugh if he knew? Part of me wanted to retreat, to distance myself before I let these feelings grow even stronger. But then, I thought about our conversations, the way he looked at me with such openness and respect. He never seemed to see me as just older or different. He seemed to see me, Linda, and that meant something. Still, I couldn't shake the fear. How did I even begin to navigate something like this? The days that followed were a confusing tangle of emotions. Every time I saw Jake, I felt an inner war between excitement and hesitation. I'd walk into the cafe, see him waiting with that warm smile, and my heart would skip a beat, even as my mind screamed at me to be cautious. I was painfully aware of the age difference between us, and the more time we spent together, the more I worried about what others would think if they saw us together. One afternoon, as we sat across from each other sipping coffee, he was telling me about his plans to go back to school, to study social work. I listened intently, smiling and nodding, but beneath the surface, my thoughts were running wild. I was proud of him, inspired by his ambition, yet it reminded me of the stark contrast between our lives. While I was winding down and finding peace in the quiet routines of middle age, he was just beginning, with so many paths still open to him. There were moments when I almost wanted to pull away, to protect myself from the inevitable heartbreak of something that felt destined to end. I knew that, to many people, a relationship between a woman my age and a man in his 30s would seem unconventional, even foolish. My friends would likely raise their eyebrows, and I could only imagine the judgments from strangers. But then there was the way Jake made me feel, seen, appreciated, and alive in a way I hadn't felt in years. He was kind and unpretentious, and he never once made me feel uncomfortable about our age difference. If anything, he seemed to respect my experiences, often seeking advice on life and relationships, as if he valued my perspective more than anyone else's. I was torn between the excitement of this new, unexpected chapter and the deep-rooted fears that society's expectations had ingrained in me. I found myself awake late at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I could be brave enough to pursue happiness, even if it came with complications. Part of me wanted to throw caution to the wind, to take a chance on the joy that Jake brought into my life. After all, love wasn't something I'd anticipated finding again at my age, and it felt precious, like something worth fighting for. But was I ready to take that leap? After weeks of deliberation, I finally made the decision that had been swirling in my mind. I would invite Jake over for dinner. It felt like a monumental step, one that would take our connection beyond the casual cafe chats and grocery store encounters. The thought both excited and terrified me. I spent days planning, my mind racing with the possibilities and the potential outcomes. I wanted everything to be perfect. I imagined the dining table set with my favorite dishes, soft music playing in the background, and the aroma of a home-cooked meal filling the air. But with each thought came the creeping doubt. What if it was too much? What if he saw this as me trying too hard, or worse, what if he felt uncomfortable? In my quieter moments, I reminded myself that this was simply a dinner between friends. We'd shared meals together before, but this time felt different, more intimate. I wanted him to see me in my space, to experience a glimpse of the life I had built for myself after so many years of raising my children and navigating my own solitude. As the day of the dinner approached, I found myself cleaning my home with a fervor I hadn't felt in years. I organized the clutter in my living room, polished the dining table until it gleamed, and even made a trip to the store for fresh flowers to brighten the atmosphere. It felt both exhilarating and nerve-wracking, like preparing for a first date. I was nervous about how this would change everything between us. On the day of our dinner, I spent the afternoon cooking his favorite, pasta with homemade sauce, garlic bread, and a fresh salad. As I chopped the vegetables and stirred the sauce, I couldn't help but replay our conversations in my mind. Would he still see me as the confident, lively woman I felt I was becoming, or would he notice my insecurities? Finally, as the clock ticked closer to the time we had agreed upon, I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. I wanted this evening to be an open door into my world, a chance for Jake to see me beyond the friendly chats and light banter. I hoped that through this meal, he'd sense the warmth and care I had for him. As I set the table, I heard the familiar sound of his footsteps on my front porch. My heart raced, a mix of anticipation and fear flooding my senses. I opened the door to find Jake standing there, a bottle of wine in hand and that charming smile on his face. I stepped aside to let him in, feeling the weight of the moment settle over us like a warm embrace. It was time to see where this journey would take us. As Jake stepped into my home, the warm aroma of garlic and simmering tomatoes enveloped us, and I could see him visibly relax. His eyes lit up as he took in the setting, the neatly set table, the flickering candlelight, and the soft music playing in the background. "Wow, Linda, this looks amazing," he said, a hint of awe in his voice. "Thank you. I hope you're hungry," I replied, my heart fluttering with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. We moved into the kitchen, and I poured the wine he had brought into 2 glasses. As I handed one to him, our fingers brushed, sending a spark of electricity through me. I couldn't ignore the rush of feelings that surged at that moment. Dinner flowed seamlessly, our laughter mingling with the clinking of glasses and the sound of utensils on plates. We talked about everything, his dreams of becoming a social worker, my stories of raising kids as a single mother, our favorite books and movies, and even our childhood memories. The more we talked, the more I felt the walls around my heart start to crumble. Jake had a way of making everything feel light, even the heavier subjects. As we finished our meal, I excused myself to grab dessert from the kitchen, leaving him to gather the dishes. When I returned with a homemade tiramisu, I found him leaning against the counter, his expression thoughtful. "You know," he said slowly, "I've really enjoyed getting to know you. I didn't expect to meet someone like you when I moved here." I felt a warmth spreading in my chest. "I feel the same way." "It's been refreshing," I admitted, and then I paused, the weight of my emotions suddenly pressing down on me. "You bring a lot of joy into my life, Jake." His gaze locked onto mine, and I could see the sincerity in his eyes. "I'm glad to hear that. You make me feel seen, Linda. Not just as a younger guy or someone who's new to town, but as me." The vulnerability in his voice made my heart race. We stood there for a moment, the air thick with unspoken words. I could feel the connection between us intensifying, a palpable energy that pulled us closer. I wanted to close the distance, to lean in and feel his warmth against me, but a small voice in my head cautioned me to be careful. Just then, as if sensing my hesitation, he took a step forward. "Is it okay if he started, and before I could process what he was saying, he closed the gap, wrapping his arms around me. The embrace was warm and comforting, but there was an undeniable spark that ignited between us. I felt my breath hitch in my throat, caught between fear and exhilaration. It was a simple gesture, yet it felt monumental. The world around us faded away, leaving just the two of us in that moment, wrapped in each other's arms. As I melted into his embrace, I realized that this was the intimacy I had longed for, a connection that transcended age, a bond that felt real and true. As we pulled away, our eyes met, and I knew in that instant that something had shifted between us. The evening had deepened our friendship into something more, and I was left wondering just how far we could go from here. In the days following our dinner, I found myself in a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. The warmth of Jake's embrace lingered in my memory, and I replayed that moment over and over in my mind, a constant reminder of how everything had changed. My heart felt full yet conflicted, and I couldn't shake the questions that began to surface with alarming clarity. What did this mean for us? For me? I was still grappling with the reality of our age difference and the implications it might carry. Friends, family, society, what would they say? Would they see me as desperate or foolish for entertaining this connection? I had built a life around safety and routine, and now, it felt as though I was standing on the edge of something thrilling yet terrifying. One afternoon, I took a long walk through the nearby park, my mind racing. The leaves were beginning to change color, a reminder that time was always moving forward. It struck me then how I had spent so many years pushing my own desires aside, convinced that romance was meant for the younger crowd. Yet here I was, falling for someone who had brought laughter and joy back into my life. Sitting on a bench, I gazed at the families around me, parents with their children, couples hand in hand. I wondered if they ever questioned their own choices or if they felt the weight of judgment that hung in the air like an invisible cloud. My heart ached at the thought of missing out on something beautiful because of fear or societal expectations. Love shouldn't be constrained by age, it should be celebrated, regardless of how unconventional it may seem. I thought about Jake, his energy, his kindness, the way he made me feel vibrant and alive. In his presence, I felt young again, as though the years of loneliness and heartache had faded into the background. He didn't see me as a woman in her 50s, he saw me for who I truly was, a passionate person with a heart still full of dreams and desires. That evening, as I prepared for another coffee date with Jake, I made a decision. I would embrace this connection, whatever it may become. I would no longer allow the fear of judgment to dictate my happiness. Instead, I would focus on the joy that filled my heart whenever I was with him. I found myself excited rather than anxious, eager to explore the depths of our relationship. As I picked out my outfit, a simple but elegant dress, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror. I saw a woman who was ready to reclaim her happiness, someone willing to step outside her comfort zone and take a chance on love. When I met Jake that evening, his smile illuminated my world. "You look beautiful," he said, and I felt my heart soar. In that moment, I knew that love could be found at any age, and I was ready to embrace it, no matter the challenges it might bring. As the weeks turned into months, Jake and I found ourselves deepening our bond, navigating the complexities of our intergenerational romance with a mix of joy and trepidation. Each date was an exploration, filled with laughter, intimate conversations, and moments that took my breath away. I learned to let go of my fears, allowing myself to fully experience the happiness that came from being with him. One evening, as we strolled through the park under a blanket of stars, I took a moment to reflect on how far I had come. My heart felt light, unfettered by the burdens I had carried for so long. I realized that love knows no boundaries, no timelines, and no societal norms. It flourishes in the most unexpected places, and can change your life in ways you never imagined. We often talked about our future, not in concrete terms, but with dreams and hopes. Jake shared his ambitions, and I confided my aspirations of traveling, rediscovering passions I had set aside. It became clear to me that our age difference was just a number. What truly mattered was the emotional connection we shared, the understanding and respect we cultivated day by day. One night, after a particularly lovely dinner at my place, Jake took my hands in his gaze steady and sincere. "Linda, I know there are challenges ahead, but I want you to know that I'm here for it all. I'm willing to fight for us," he said softly, and in that moment, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. I squeezed his hands, a smile spreading across my face. "I want that too, Jake. I'm ready to embrace whatever comes our way. Age doesn't define us, love does." As I reflected on my journey, I felt a sense of empowerment. I had learned that it was never too late to pursue happiness or to open my heart to love again. I hoped my story would encourage others, especially those who felt confined by their circumstances, to take risks and seek out what brought them joy. In a world that often discourages unconventional relationships, I found a profound truth: love is ageless. It transcends societal judgments and fills your life with meaning, joy, and connection. So, I chose to embrace this love, to chase after happiness without fear or hesitation. As Jake and I walked into our future, hand in hand, I knew that we would face whatever challenges came our way together. Love was a journey, and I was finally ready to embark on it, open-hearted and free, no longer held back by the chains of expectation.